Before we get into the discussion about MMAT, TRCH, MMTLP, in my humble opinion, do I think this was ever a reasonable investment? No. Fundamentally, TRCH was not a good company. Fundamentally, MMAT wasn't a good company. If you were arguing MMAT, MMTLP were good fundamental investments, I disagree with you. We just have a different way of breaking down fundamentals. Now, just because something's not a good fundamental investment doesn't mean it can't move quite a bit to the upside. I mean, I believe the same thing about Mullen. I don't think it's a good fundamental investment, but you still get these points where it rips 185%. So I want to clarify. The only way, and I don't own MMAT, I don't own MMTLP or MMTLP, TRCH, any of those. I don't have any skin in the game. I just think it's an interesting story. Now, if I'm coming clean with all of you on MMAT, I want to let you know that at first I brushed the community off. I did, because I think they were focusing on the wrong thing to the point that I didn't know other things were going on. So to give you guys a quick rundown of what's going on, TRCH was an independent company. MMAT was an independent company. MMAT absorbed TRCH and it got transformed into preferred security known as MMTLP. So basically, you have one company absorbing a different company. By all accounts, neither of these were strong fundamental investments. Once again, that doesn't mean anything to do with maybe a volatile short squeeze to the upside. Those are two very distinct things. But at first, this came onto my radar back in mid-December, specifically around December 8th. That, if you look at MMTLP, which I don't even think is up anymore, that's when it stopped trading, was on December 8th. And that's part of the story there. But at first, the major thing that everyone was talking about was FINRA fraud. It should have never stopped trading. And I actually inherently think that's true, but not for the reason that many people were talking about. Like, a lot of people are like, we were promised 2 more trading days. Not really, because they didn't understand the settlement cycle. Because what was supposed to happen is TRCH, which turned into MMTLP, is going to get switched into a private company. Nextbridge, Horizon, Hydrocarbons. Nextbridge, I don't fucking care because it's going to be a trash company. But anyway, it's a private company and you have to have the record date and the final day of trading. Well, if you have the record date before the final day of trading, remember, in our current market, it takes 2 days for a trade to settle, which means all the trading done after the record date, it would get really, really messy with people doing the proper deliveries of that stuff of like, wait, hang on. Well, who owned it on the 8th and then they sold it after? So who gets it? Blah, 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 that type of a thing. A lot of confusion. And a lot of people were trying to get like FINRA fraud to trend and that type of stuff. And at first, my understanding was that the people who were talking about this 2-day settlement cycle just didn't, or about the loss of 2 days of trading, didn't understand the settlement cycle. And so I kind of disregarded it because I was like, okay, you just like either you know about the 2-day settlement cycle or you don't. So I didn't really think much of it. And then recently, a lot of people who've been awesome reach out in DMs. I was on some calls and there's other things in the story that I think are actually more interesting than the 2-day window. I really do. So the very first thing is TRCH itself. TRCH is the thing that turned into MMTLP, excuse me. So right away, one of the first things I heard, and I will be completely honest about this, was I heard a lot of people saying MMTLP shouldn't be trading. And I was like, that's crazy. And you don't understand the market because there's no way in God's green earth in the US of A that something is trading on the market that shouldn't be trading because it takes a lot of effort to get something on the market to actively trade. So I heard that right away. And me being the dum-dum that I am, thinking that there was some general reason to believe in the market that there wasn't such an egregious amount of corruption, I was like, no way, the MMTLP community is misunderstanding it. No way, no how, they had to agree. I swallowed a little bit of my pride and I reached out to the 2 people involved in this story. So the previous CEO of TRCH is John Berta. And then the current CEO of MMAT is George, something that starts with a P, a very long last name. So I figured, hey, let's see. Even though I thought it was crazy, I figured, let's ask. The former CEO of TRCH, and remember TRCH was absorbed by MMAT, I reached out to him first. Can you publicly state that no person from TRCH or MMAT approved the trading of MMTLP? Once again, I thought someone had to, but right away it wasn't TRCH. This is the former CEO. I'm not going to speak for MMAT, but no one from TRCH, its executives or board members approved this. As far as MMAT is concerned, they publicly stated on many calls and interviews that they had nothing to do with this. So I don't really care too much about the second part. All I care is this first part. John, the former CEO of TRCH, publicly stated no one from TRCH, its executives or board approved this. No one. So, okay, the next question is maybe TRCH didn't, but maybe MMAT did. So I take the next step and I go to cover our bases. And right here, this guy, George Palakaris, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say his last name. He's the founder and CEO of MMAT, the other person in question. To cover our bases, George, can you confirm no person from MMAT gave permission for MMTLP to be publicly traded? 100%. No person was given permission was given by anyone at MMAT. In fact, as John already knows, we immediately inquired and reported to FINRA that certain published corporate information used on the OTC was false. So once again, I'm not a person saying that MMAT and TRCH deserve to be trading way higher because they were great fundamental companies. In reality, they weren't great fundamental companies, but that doesn't mean that other crazy stuff couldn't be happening. So then we get to this problem of MMTLP, of it was trading. And like I said, my initial instinct was there's no way a market maker was trading in unsponsored security. So I went to the two people who would know about this situation. John, the CEO of TRCH, and George, the CEO of Meta, have now both publicly stated that no one, not their executives, not their board, no one, zilch, from either of the companies ever allowed the trading of MMTLP. And then honestly, George took it a step farther. We immediately inquired and reported to FINRA that certain published corporate information used on the OTC was false. When this all happened in like early to mid-December, a lot of people were saying FINRA fraud. And it had a lot to do with the halt, but I truly do understand why FINRA halted it. But in a weird way, I'm on the same page as those people. Do I think there was FINRA fraud? Well, there's either FINRA fraud or there's TRCH/MMAT. You can't live in a world where either John and or George is lying to us or FINRA is lying to us. So for this portion of it, let me wrap it up. Circa December 8th, and then the confusion from December 8th to the 12th, FINRA fraud within this community was kind of trending. It was a hot topic. And right away, I kind of pushed it off because I was like, you don't understand the settlement cycle. But now, just from the information we have from George and John, the combo of MMAT and TRCH, either they're lying, which I don't think they are, because how stupid would you be to publicly say something that you know you're lying? So to me, it still comes back to FINRA fraud. And obviously, like maybe more evidence is uncovered. So that's the first thing. I want to know that. And I think there's a legitimate argument. Like if you're in the MMATLP community, if your question is, did someone fuck you? And the answer is yes. It's more of a question of who. And that's, I guess, kind of the onus is on us and legal teams and people to kind of dive into. So this isn't one of those things of, is it a suggestion of crime? No, it's not that at all. It's a crime. It's just a question of who perpetrated said crime. I want to be very, very clear about this. Now, let's fast forward to the next interesting thing that, once again, I kind of pushed off to the side. And this all comes back to the 2-day settlement window. Like if you're looking at Friday, December 8th, and then they're like, well, why are people still trading, not trading, blah, 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 all that good stuff. The 2-day settlement, I didn't think people got it. But the way to really resolve all of that, and I'll be honest, at first I thought MMAT's leadership was to do exactly what he stated here. I was like, oh, they don't understand the settlement cycle and they accidentally screwed people over. Because what you had to do was have the record date and the final trading day be the same day. And then that's the final trading day. And then 2 days later, to account for the 2-day settlement, that's when you want it to be delisted. And I was like, oh, this is just a bad look on MMAT's leadership team for not understanding that. And then, you know me, I'm just scrolling down Twitter. I decided to look into it. And in fact, I got to give George credit because it seems like he and his team knew exactly what was up. Today, Meta requested FINRA to halt MMTLP on December 14th at close, current distribution date, or to freeze trading on December 12th at close, current record date. That's what you have to do. You have to freeze trading 2 days before because you don't want any trades after it's frozen. So in reality, they were asking for the right thing. Please take the time to read the S1, no public trading after the distribution date, i.e. there is no ex-dividend date. They asked, we requested FINRA do it. So in two distinct scenarios here, something's a little fishy. Something's a little smelly with FINRA. What's going on with the approval of trading that allegedly no one at MMAT or TRCH ever allowed, the trading of MMTLP? No one looked at that. What's going on? Why did FINRA allow that? And then the second one is, okay, FINRA, this accounts for the problem. Like the halt that we saw on the 8th was to account for all this craziness between the final trading, the delisting, the record date. This right here, what's in front of you, would account for that. You freeze trading on the 12th, you allow 2 more days so everything can settle, and then it's donezo on the 14th. So that's a big question. And then the third thing, for MMTLP, it was on the threshold list, which means on a relative basis, it had a high spike in FTDs in excess of 40 days. Why wasn't that ever addressed? And once again, that's something that the DTCC/FINRA could look into. So for me in this scenario, and I know I said this before, if you are in the MMTLP community, whether you're someone like me, just following the story, or you were actively invested, were you screwed over by someone? Yes. In my heart of hearts, I truly believe that. As of now, does it strongly look like FINRA at some percentage basis was culpable or to blame? Yes. Do they deserve 100? Do they deserve 50? Do they deserve some other number? I don't know, but I think FINRA has some serious questions to answer in this whole MMTLP debacle. Moving forward, if you have any evidence, questions, comments, concerns, send them my way, leave them in a comment below. But I think the next reasonable step for me is to do a live discussion with both George and John to make sure that I haven't taken any missteps in my basic armchair journalism. But obviously, let me know your questions, comments, concerns in a comment.